Hello, welcome back to Kim Reads as we continue with Phantom. Javert was not a true-born Romany, not even a Faucheret or a half-breed. He was a Charody, a wanderer tolerated purely for his skills as a showman, and I soon began to understand that though he traveled with the gypsies, he was no more part of their tightly knit community than I was. At some point in his past, he had had a nodding acquaintance with education. Unlike the rest of the community, he could read, and from time to time, odd remnants of culture would surface inexplicably through the layers of his inherent vulgarity. It was Javert who told me the legend of Don Juan and added the great lover's name to the odd collection of nicknames which he delighted to address me. At first, it was just another insult, no more hurtful than anything else, but as I grew older and more aware of the meaning behind his mockery, I began to hate the name of Don Juan more than any other. Javert was forever parading of lovers, and yet no woman ever came to his tent. Since he was no man's blood brother, there was no father in the camp that would accept a bride price from him. In my innocent ignorance, I simply assumed that was the reason that he had no wife. He strode into my tent one evening without warning, as was his wont, and leaned over me, breathing his vile spirit fumes into my face. I could see that he was drunk, and when he was drunk, he was dangerous. I knew I would have to take care. "Working. Always working," he remarked unpleasantly, pushing a fat finger into the mechanism of a new device which lay on the table before me. "What an industrious little corpse you are." When an unseen spring snapped shut on his finger, I received a blow on the head which tumbled me on the floor. "Damn you," he snapped. "You made that happen." "I did not," I flared with indignation, since for once I was telling the truth. "It was an accident." "Yes, I dare say," he sneered. "You're very good at arranging accidents, aren't you? I've noticed how many little misfortunes befall me when you are around." I was silent, wondering with alarm whether he really could have guessed just how much mischief I was responsible for. That fall from his horse, for instance. The inexplicable collapse of his tents. Silly, irritating, commonplace misfortunes that I thought him incapable of connecting with me. I looked into his face, saw with terror that he knew everything and would wait for punishment to fall. I didn't have to wait long. Abruptly, he snatched the mask from my face, slashing it to pieces with his ugly knife, and flung the pieces at me, and then he stared at me. "No tears?" he frowned. "You disappoint me, little corpse, and surely you know better by now than to disappoint old Javert." He reached out and struck me repeatedly across the face with the back of his huge hand. But I remained silent, staring at him with dry loathing. And at length I remembered that I was to perform that evening. He abandoned his attempt to make me cry. "A man at last," he said begrudgingly, "no longer a snivelling brat. You'll be wanting a wage next, I suppose." I judged it safer to remain silent as he loomed over me. I learned to distrust these moments of apparent generosity. They were usually the prelude to fresh violence or humiliation. "How old are you?" he demanded unexpectedly. "I don't know." I kept my eyes on the floor. "You don't know?" he snickered suddenly. "Surely you have a date of birth like everyone else. Or perhaps you weren't born at all. Maybe you just hatched out of an egg like a lizard." A looking glass shattered in my memory and I shivered. I don't know," I repeated shakily. It was never spoken of. It was also celebrated once and never again. He passed the sleeve of his shirt across his nose and grinned, showing a row of yellow gapped teeth. Ugh. "Well, I dare say there was nothing much to celebrate. It's a miracle no one dropped you on the fire before you drew a breath. But I say you must be 11 or 12 by now. Does that seem about right to you?" I nodded warily, wondering where the strange line of questioning could be leading. "Well then," he continued affably. "Another year or so, if you keep drawing these crowds, I might see my way clear to paying you a wage. Of course, it would depend on whether you continue to give satisfaction, on and off, if you get my meaning. I like boys who know how to show their gratitude, in a manner of speaking." I stared at him blankly. "I don't understand," I whispered. "Don't worry, you will." He laughed and cuffed me playfully around the ear. "Yes, you'll understand, all in good time. You're very clever, I grant you that. A sight too clever for your own good at times, but you don't know everything. That's a thing or two that I can teach you when I've a mind to do it. And if you're willing to learn, if you're willing to please, well, you might find me very generous." I had no clue what he was talking about, but his tone and soft, almost feline manner made me cold with apprehension. This curious amability cloaked to an unknown threat, as yet beyond my comprehension, and was afraid to ask any more questions. I had the feeling that for once I did not want to know the answers. He sucked his bleeding fingers, spat upon the earthen floor, and sauntered to the flap of the tent. In the doorway he turned back at me, and there was a strange expression on his face. "I've never had a corpse before," he mused. And then he was gone, leaving me alone with my ignorance and my fear. I waited nervously during the following months for this nameless disaster to overtake me. But my life continued as before, and nothing worse befell me than the beatings which I was already familiar. I learned to accept physical pain with a show of indifference. If my performance was not perfect, if I crossed my master with a casual, unconsidered word, I knew exactly what to expect. But my split skin and bruises healed quickly, and I was careful never to make a mistake more than once. I had learned how to survive. At some point during the following year, we crossed the boundary into Spain, traveling steadily into the direction of Catalonia. The annual fair at Verdu had been a traditional meeting place for gypsies since the 14th century, and an atmosphere of suppressed excitement permitted at the camp the prospect of emotional reunions with blood brothers. At night, the tents and wagons discord their occupants around the campfire. The fiddlers struck up a merry refrain, and the gypsy girls danced with their menfolk, weaving in and out of the flickering light, trailing long scarves over bare, sometimes arms. Graceful, sensual. There was a time I had learned to love above all else, when the magic of the gypsies unfolded before my eyes as I lay a little distance away, watching, listening, absorbing, yet silent and unseen, like a snake in the dry grass. Their culture was a universe removed from the respectable middle-class existence I had known before, a life steeped in the love of music and governed by an instinctive, abiding respect in the forces of magic and mystery. To a gypsy, every stream, forest, and hedgerow is peopled by invisible sprites and demons that must be constantly appeased by incantations and charms. The occult holds a powerful grip, and fortune is determined by the turn of a tarot card. I was fascinated by the secrets of divination and enthralled by their music, which opened up vistas to my formerly trained ear. I was music that knowledge, no artificial boundaries. Dispensing with chords, transitions, and intermediate modulations, its freedom was utterly intoxicating. I had listened and learned, and all that absorbed found an expression in the secret world within my tent and music or illusion. No part of me was untouched by their inspiration, but I did not acquire those hidden contents of beauty and mystery without pain. I had been a solitary child, content with my own company, neither knowing nor desiring companions. But now I looked upon a very different world, a world of gregarious, tightly woven people who were not forbidden by unspoken taboos to touch each other or be in public in that touching. Every evening that I watched them together, fighting, laughing, loving, made the awareness of my difference increasingly sharp and hurtful. threw a cold new light on my inner misery. Perhaps if I had not tumbled among the gypsies, I should not have been aware of the female form at such an early age. Perhaps I should have enjoyed a few more years of sexless boyish ignorance. Gypsy women are not light and lavish in their ways. Virgins are highly valued and only to be bought for an acceptable bride price. But love, once sanctified by marriage, was not a private thing, and couples embraced freely around the campfire, displaying their pleasures in other bodies without change. That spring in Verdure, it seemed to me that the whole world was pairing off together, sharing a universal secret that would always be closed to me. And suddenly it was not enough to be the devil's apprentice, the star turn of an increasingly famous traveling show. All I wanted was to be like everyone else. While the wedding celebrations were at their height, the fiddles throbbed with an extraordinary love of life, which was so peculiar and gypsy throughout the world. I slipped away into black, shapeless night, and still what I needed from the wise woman's tent. I could live with cruelty and hatred. It was the happiness of others that I could no longer endure. The sudden realization that none of my talents were ever going to win me acceptance as a human being. My tent might be comfortable now. I might be free to come and go as I please, but all the essentials I still lived in a cage surrounded by invisible bars. The world wanted nothing from me except the gratification of the sensory organs of sight and sound. I was alone and nothing was ever going to change that. Perhaps it was time to leave that world behind. Well, that's it. See you next time.